Hello and welcome to the All About Fintech panel event. I'm very excited to bring to you today a fantastic panel of experts in blockchain and crypto, legal tech and open banking. I'm delighted to be able to welcome Tara Waters from Ashurst Advance Digital, Udita Banerjee from Natwest Group, and Gustav Arentoft from the Maker Foundation. So welcome and thank you all so much for joining us today. Perhaps we could start by going around and if you could give us a brief introduction to yourselves, your current role and how you got there. So Gustav, can we start with you?
Yeah, sure. So thanks very much for having me, Amelia. My name is Gustav. I'm Danish, and I've been working with the Maker Foundation for a little bit more than 2 years now. We are the foundation behind a protocol called MakerDAO, where we are the world's largest decentralized stablecoin. So we issue, like the protocol issues, a stable crypto asset, which is pegged to the dollar. We have around $1 billion of it out there at the moment. And we're also one of the largest financial protocols in the crypto space, with around $2 billion of assets in our protocol. Prior to joining the Maker Foundation, I was living and working in Argentina. And that was kind of like how I got the insights into why I felt like cryptocurrencies was such an important part of many societies around the world. I spent around 1.5 years out there and had to deal with the local inflation, and it kind of like lured me more and more into the crypto industry. So once I had the chance to go into it full time, I jumped ahead.
Fantastic, thank you. And now maybe to Udita.
Yeah, thanks very much for having me as well. It's really nice to be here this afternoon. So I work in Natwest Group, which most of you might know is a large tier 1 bank in the UK. It also owns other brands like RBS, Royal Bank of Scotland, Coutts, are all kind of owned by Natwest Group. So I've been here for 6 years, and over that time I've worked in various parts of the business, including mainframe services and also technology innovation. Open banking is kind of part of what I do as part of my role in innovation now. To get here, I studied engineering at university, and I did my undergrad in India, which is where I'm from. And then I moved to the UK and did my master's in engineering, and then joined RBS on their grad scheme a few years ago. So that's how I kind of ended up in banking. Originally, I'd never thought that I would end up in banking or in fintech specifically, but it just sort of happened. Although I'm still very much within the technology side of banking, so I like to keep close to the tech as well from that perspective. So yeah, that's me, and looking forward to chatting to you and the rest of the panel this afternoon.
Thank you. And Tara?
Yes, hi, I'm Tara Waters. I'm an American living in London. I'm a partner at Ashurst, which is a global law firm, and I'm head of Ashurst Advance Digital, which is the technology arm of our NewLaw division called Ashurst Advance. So in that role, me and my team are responsible for using technology within the firm to enable our lawyers and to deliver services to our clients in new and better ways. And part of that is actually us developing some of our own technology solutions as well. So we've got an implementation and a development function. My background is actually starting out in technology. So I was a web developer as my first job straight out of university in the early 2000s in New York City. Got convinced to go to law school. Someone thought I would make a good lawyer, and jumped at the opportunity to actually live in another country and be a US lawyer. So I moved to London in 2009, joined a large international law firm, and basically tried to find a way to marry my technology background with my legal background. And eventually, over the course of several years, managed to do that. So my legal practice is actually technology focused. So I still do practice law, and I head up our high growth and VC team. So I principally work with early stage technology companies across a range of industries, but definitely a huge focus in the fintech space. And we work a lot in DLT and crypto as well. And so I'm kind of balancing that a little bit on the side with sort of my main job working with Ashurst Advance Digital.
Thank you. I'm really looking forward to digging into all of these different things that you guys are involved in. But perhaps we can start, since this isn't all about fintech panel, perhaps we can start by just defining fintech. I think it means different things to different people, and it's certainly changing all the time. So Gustav, what would you define fintech as, and how do you see that changing in the future?
So, I mean, I think like where fintech started, it really just started as like a concept for when companies started using technology to solve financial problems, and this was done quite a lot outside of the bank, and it used to be like mostly like very startup-ish space. And I think like in the beginning, like people probably didn't pay too much attention to it. But where we are with fintech now is that it's really evolved into like an industry of its own. So now it's kind of like its own vertical within the financial services sphere. It's often taking and innovating a lot on the traditional business models. It's also been proven to be quite efficient at attracting retail users. So like for me, fintech is just when you have companies that are like at least start out as non-banks. I know that some of the fintech companies end up getting a banking license later on, but they start out as non-banks and they provide financial services improved by technology.
Thank you. And perhaps Udita, since you're coming from an incumbent from a different kind of perspective, what's fintech to you?
Yeah, so all of the stuff that Gustav said obviously holds. But I think a great way to think about fintech is think about it as technologists that do financial services. And I think you can see that in every industry. You have the classic example of, like Uber. It's not a taxi company, it's a technology company simplifying travel. And then you have Airbnb. It's a technology company that's simplifying, short-term and long-term stays and hotels and is disrupting the incumbent hotel industry. So I think the best way to think about fintech is technologists doing banking and financial services. I would also say that fintech kind of started bubbling up under the surface about a decade ago. And round about that time, just after the financial crash of 2007, 2008, the Competition and Markets Authority put in a lot of regulation that allowed fintechs to apply for banking licenses, become fully fledged companies on their own. And it was designed in order to increase competition in a market that was only incumbents, right? And obviously that's what has made the industry grow and sustain itself and come alive and has attracted a lot of worldwide investment. And I think it's important to recognize that although regulation can sometimes be seen as a boring side effect, but in this case, this is the thing that has enabled this entire industry to kind of come alive and bring better products and services to customers of banking.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a really interesting perspective on regulation as well and how it can actually encourage innovation. Tara, I'd be interested to know what you think about fintech and especially contrasting it to LegalTech, which I know you're also involved in, and what you think about technology disrupting these age-old professions such as finance and law.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy I wasn't the one that suggested regulation had actually had a positive effect. And actually, I was on a session yesterday with a group of fintech investors, and we're having a really interesting discussion. I thought it was worth raising here, this concept about fintech. And firstly, I think it's a concept that has evolved with the industry. So in the 70s and 80s, it genuinely was just about injecting technology into the system. ATMs were fintech, Swift was fintech. to a certain extent. So now, we're seeing that happen at much quicker cycles. But I think what's been really interesting in general is technology becoming, no longer being a vertical, but actually being a horizontal infrastructure layer in all businesses. So in some manner, every business working in financial services is using technology. Technology enablement is core to so many businesses now, and that's exactly what we're seeing happening in other industries like law, insurance, et cetera, we're seeing the importance of technology as being foundational to how we operate and how we deliver our services and products to our end users and customers and clients, as being an essential piece of the puzzle in terms of what we need to do. And I think what we've, all of our other industries, including legal, has gained from what we've seen happen in fintech is that example. And I think fintech is probably one of the most progressed sectors where we've seen that the potential of technology, the disruption of technology, how it has fundamentally changed the way incumbents in that industry need to do business. And what we're seeing is very, very slowly the other industries going through very similar cycles of existentialism, kind of like, are we gonna survive this? Are the disruptors gonna come through and just wipe us out? To acceptance, okay, this is actually good for us. Let's use this as a drive for better innovation and improvement of how we're all doing things. And now, in legal in particular, we're seeing a much more open culture where we're looking to collaborate across the industry with the new technology companies coming up, and we're able to borrow from finance, insurance, and other technology or other industries that are using technology and look and see what is the best practice, what are the best technologies, how do we bring them into our industry to help just increase and improve and accelerate the transformation that we know needs to take place.
Yeah, I think it's really exciting to see how technology can shape all these industries, and we're at a really exciting time right now, especially for graduates going into this industry. I mean, we'll dive more into this later, but I think it's an exciting time. So perhaps, Gustav, you could try and define for us what blockchain and crypto are, because these are terms that we hear a lot, and I think they get said a lot together, but they are very two distinct things. So could you perhaps break down the difference between the two?
Yeah. So basically, a blockchain is the underlying technology, right? And I think one of the reasons why they get linked together so much is, I mean, every single cryptocurrency runs on a blockchain, but a blockchain is not necessarily a cryptocurrency, right? And Bitcoin is still by far the most well-known crypto asset out there, and was the first one as well, which again is linked together. So like the blockchain is basically where you have like a network or like a community of participants who has some kind of a way of reaching a consensus on which transactions to include. In cryptocurrencies, you often see this consensus model being driven by economic incentives. So, for example, on Bitcoin, you have these miners who are solving some cryptographic, problem, and then they basically, have people who's paying them to include their transactions in the next block. So there they get directly rewarded both through transaction fees as well as inflation rewards for, participating in the network. However, you have also seen some of the, private blockchains, you can call them, where you would have like, I know there's some banking networks that use blockchains to get some shipping networks as well, where this is not necessarily driven by fees, but this is more driven, by them just being market participants, and then the value generated is at another level, right? So for them, it's a level of like having a way of settling transactions or monitoring things that are happening, and that is where they generate the value. So that is like the core concept of a blockchain. A cryptocurrency is then a digital asset that can live on top of a blockchain. So a cryptocurrency also doesn't necessarily have its own blockchain. So for example, DAI, which is our stablecoin, lives on the Ethereum blockchain. So the Ethereum blockchain has thousands of different types of assets that are all living on that blockchain, being transacted on that blockchain. So I think like the distinction between the two is really that like the blockchain itself is a technology, and that can have many applications, outside of transferring monetary values. And the cryptocurrency itself is some kind of representation of value on the blockchain. And then again, you also have different categories of tokens. So you have stable coins, utility tokens, security tokens, and so on. And also coins and tokens are two different fields as well. So I think that is like the main differences between the two.
Thank you. And just to follow up on that, so some people think that perhaps crypto is just a fad or it doesn't really have a future. What do you think is the future of cryptocurrencies? And I assume you don't agree with that, but why do you disagree with that?
I mean, I think already now it is established something that is very, very useful in certain cases, right? I mean, we also see that even the big central banks are looking to issue their own digital currencies because the blockchain is a great way of tracking transactions aboard a large network of participants. So I think like the utility of it has already manifested itself. It's just like a question of like which shape or form it will take place in society, right? And where it's particularly very, very useful is where you are living in networks where you don't necessarily trust the other participants, because since that you have a model that is driven, for example, by economic incentives, you can actually get a network of people who doesn't necessarily know each other, trust each other. You can get them to do the same thing by giving economic incentives. So, some of the places where we have the most traction is in emerging economies. And I know that a lot of the people who's very vocal about crypto not, being a part of the society we live in, they probably only know Bitcoin by name, and they come from, the Western world. But for example, one of our biggest markets is actually Argentina, where I used to live. And out there's massive utility for the local population, right? There's simply, places around the world, where the local financial infrastructure simply does not provide the services that the population needs. And what crypto is, it's a global network, right? So, for example, in the field that I work in is something called decentralized finance. And decentralized finance is basically like a global financial infrastructure that is completely unbiased and trustless. So that means it doesn't matter, whether you're from Denmark, the UK, South Africa, Argentina, you will get similar services if you supply the similar assets, right? And since blockchain is built up in a way where you don't really have to trust each other, you can actually start, leapfrogging people who doesn't have access to financial services into a place that is very efficient and where they actually get much better services than they would in their local environments. So I think, where the utility of crypto assets will manifest itself is still to be seen. But I'm pretty confident that eventually it will play some role in most people's everyday lives. Whether that's through you're a Bitcoin speculator, will probably not be the majority of the population. There will probably be a very small part. But once we see these central bank digital currencies coming out, I mean, no matter how you want to label it or how you want to, coin it, it will still be a digital crypto asset, right? And if they come out, they'll be launched on global and national scales. So there's a good chance that a very, very big part of the population will be onboarded into some kind of digital crypto asset.
Can I add something to that, which is just to go to the point that I was making about fintech becoming more of an infrastructure layer. I think blockchain DLT is a classic example where it's creating genuinely infrastructure, like actually hard infrastructure as well as soft infrastructure for the financial services industry. And as Gustav said, what it's done is, especially through things like DeFi, is it's created improved competition and improved options in the industry, allowing different types of services, again, to be offered by different providers and very new in different ways using this new technology.
Thank you. Yeah, and I think another term that we hear a lot is open banking. So perhaps, Udita, could you talk a little bit about what is open banking?
Yeah, sure. So open banking, for those who are unfamiliar with it, is basically what it says on the tin. So historically, banks have been custodians of a lot of customer data, and they have been the exclusive vehicle for delivering certain financial products and services. But obviously, with the opening up of innovation and all of these new kinds of technologies that we are starting to see, blockchain, DLT are good examples. Others include things like quantum computing, voice, AI, machine learning, all of these new things. With the opening up of the technology ecosystem, if you like, banking has needed to open up as well. And so open banking is basically the philosophy which mandates large incumbent banks and smaller banks too, if they so wish, to open up access to their data and services via secure mechanisms to other organizations. What that allows is smaller players in the market to build products and services which perhaps or niche penetration, but that's based on the banking data and services that are perhaps provided by large banks. Another way to think about it is also the fact that banks have historically, as I said, been custodians of customer data, right? But customer data does not belong to banks. And I think we are moving into a world where the customer is more aware of privacy, security, and is more empowered to control their own data. And open banking, in a way, also segues in quite nicely to that new model of thinking where, you know, the customer is in control of their own data and who they wish to share it with or not share it with. And we find that more and more people are becoming sophisticated in thinking about how they store and generate and manage their own data. A technical concept that is frequently used in while talking about open banking is APIs, application programming interfaces. The way to think about them is basically standardized and secure ways in which two systems talk to one another. So if I run a bank and I have a service, let's say identification, which let's say Tara's firm wants to call into, then typically we would have a mechanism by building APIs through which her systems would talk to my systems, and I would provide bank verified identity, if you like, to some of her customers of her firm. And yeah, so that's kind of in a nutshell what open banking is and how it's enabled. Obviously, there are many, many nuances and different kinds of almost standards and regulatory milestones and deadlines that you have to comply with and hit. But that's that's the enabler bit, and what I talked about is more of what the concept is and the philosophy and the promise that the service provides.
Thank you. That was a really thorough introduction to open banking. Sorry, so fantastic. Thank you for that. Tara, perhaps you could now describe for our viewers what Ashurst Advance Digital does. And why you established that.
Yeah, so our team was formed about 18 months ago, so we're still relatively new. And we're part of, as I mentioned, Ashurst Advance, which is a division within our firm that focuses on quote unquote new law. So basically within the legal industry, you have traditional law firms who I think most people have a relatively dim view of the level of sophistication, innovation within such firms. And really what we've seen, as I've said in other industries, is disruptors coming through, people focused on using technology, doing things with new business models in a new and more automated ways. And we call that kind of new law, this concept that traditional ways of doing things should be transformed and should be looking at whether the right person's doing the work, whether the process of what you're following can be improved, and whether technology can be used to enable it. And so as a division, that's what we're focused on. And Ashurst Advance Digital tackles that third problem. So we're one of a strand of things that works together to hopefully improve the way Ashurst delivers its services. So our team is divided between a digital services offering and a digital products offering. So on the services side, that's where we are using technology, both in-house and proprietary technology, third-party and proprietary technologies to deliver services to clients, and that's typically done on a one-to-one basis. So when we're working on a specific matter or case for a client, where it makes sense to use technology, whether that be automation or AI-assisted document review, our team will come in and help facilitate that alongside the lawyer teams. And then on the digital product side, that's genuinely trying to create a products business within a law firm. So we are designing and developing and deploying new products. We've got one in the market right now called ESG Ready. We've got a pipeline of other products that are coming through. And for that side of the work that we do, we're borrowing heavily from the technology industry and the other industries where we're seeing, all these fantastic new products that are very customer centric. And we're trying to take that model and adopt it for law firms in order to provide new services to clients and allow them to consume legal services in a way that better fits their expectations and how they are actually interacting with other aspects of their lives on a day-to-day basis, rather than following that traditional model of getting a phone call or an email, delivering a memo, writing a paper, providing them, documentation. Can we actually give them something that they can self-serve, get legal advice on demand or legal services on demand from us in the way and when they want it? So that's, we're really focused on, being the division and the team within the firm that's a key part of the digital strategy overall, how we're advancing the way we do things as a law firm, preparing ourselves for the 21st century, notwithstanding that we're already in it, and hopefully setting ourselves up to be able to continuously adapt and improve as we see technology, improve and at a much greater acceleration than our changes happening within the industry. But what we're really trying to do, and all law firms are trying to do, is catch up with the pace of technology, and then learn to harness technology to actually enable us to, potentially stay at pace with or ahead of those innovations, so that we are adapting with the times, and in particular, adapting with our clients' expectations.
And as a leader who's really innovating in the space, what do you think the kind of qualities are that you need to have to stay on top of things and to keep innovating?
I mean, I think I always say the most important thing is to be curious, and I think it can be quite easy in any job to sort of settle in and sort of okay, status quo. Let me just keep pace with things. Everything's fine, and that can be a very comfortable place to live in. But I think particularly in this space, working in an industry that is further behind than other industries, and does have some very ingrained habits that need to be broken. You need to be curious. You need to be able to ask questions. You need to be willing to raise your hand and say, actually, is the client right here? Should we be creative? Is there a chance here for us to say, maybe that's not the question you wanted to ask us, and maybe you don't want that from us. Maybe what we should provide you is this, and start to think in a little bit more of a problem-solving role, and not just a reactive way to just sit and wait to be told what to do. And when the client asks you to write this or send this email or draft this paper, to actually stop and think, is that solving the problem? Is that meeting the client's need in the best way? And being willing to step up and say, hey, either ask questions to understand whether what you're doing makes sense and is the best way to deliver what the client's asking for, or to step up and say, hey, I have a different way we might be able to do this, and I think it's going to add value for X, Y, and Z reasons. And you need to, be good at garnering some support around you on that. You can't be an island in making those suggestions. But I think what we need are people like that are willing to inject that curiosity and inject that bravery into the ecosystem, which forces everyone else to stop and turn around and say, hey, that's a great idea. Why didn't we ask that? Why did we just jump and do exactly what the client asked for, when actually we could have taken a moment and took stock and asked a few good questions and turned around and had an amazing and different proposal, but would have given the client something even more than what they initially asked for. And I think that's the change that needs to happen. And what you need are those curious minds within the firm that are actually willing to start to plant their seeds around the firm, so that you start to see them grow and they start to take hold and they start to infect other people.
Thank you. Yeah, Udita, is there anything you'd like to add to that? As I know you're also in a role where you're trying to encourage innovation.
Yeah, I mean, those were all very good points and very well made. Couple of things that probably I'd like to add. One is, just on top of curiosity, is also to have a growth mindset. And that is where you never stop learning, and you use every opportunity that comes by you to use it as a learning opportunity, and also to kind of check and balance your own development against your career goals. And again, I think, as Tara said, it's very easy to kind of get settled in your job, and you're doing what you're doing, and you're very comfortable, and you're good at it because it's a known space. Remaining relevant in any industry is to be that player who is constantly learning, constantly growing, and wants to better themselves at whatever it is you do. And I think the other thing that I'll probably add is most organizations talk a lot about customer-centric design and putting the customer at the heart of decision making, and all of those are really valid points and really good things. But Henry Ford, the car maker, had said that if I had asked a customer what they wanted in 1903, they would have said, I want a faster horse. And because a motor car didn't exist at the time. And I think true innovation is that step change where you're not just getting a faster horse, or you're not just getting continuous improvement from an existing process, but you are willing to champion the idea that is completely out there and is a step change. And that truly is innovation, not just continuous improvement. And even if you've done that once or twice in your career, then you've achieved well, I would say. So yeah, those are my two points.
Thank you. And for Gustav, a lot of students who may be watching this might be interested in going into fintech, working in blockchain or something like this. Do you have any advice for how they can go about getting into this industry or preparing themselves for a career in fintech?
I mean, so I think at least for myself, it kind of like came from like a combination that I always had an interest from technology and economics. So if that are like two fields that interest you, then I would definitely recommend you to explore it. In regards to crypto and blockchain, I know that like a lot of people, they kind of like have seen it as like an industry that is not very, what can you say, reliable, and like you don't have a lot of job security. But I personally believe that this has really changed now, right? I mean, a lot of the big startups here, including ourselves, are like incredibly well funded, has had amazing growth, really, on par with some of the biggest fintech companies we saw in their earlier days. So I think that even though it might feel like that you're going out a little bit on a limb, then I still believe that there's so much opportunity, and a lot of the big jobs here and companies, they actually have a lot of open positions. So I would really recommend if like technology and economics is something that you find interesting and intriguing, I think fintech is like a great place for you to settle in. One of the other advantages, I guess, that I hear from, I've never had a corporate job myself. I worked in tech, software, and crypto. So, but like I know a lot of people, they feel that, you know, it's definitely like less of a structured, less of a corporate space, you know, especially working like more of a startup environment. You know, you have a little bit more freedom to take decisions. You also don't have to, you know, wait 5 years before you can get kind of like a relevant role at the company. So, you know, a lot of corporate structures, you have like a pretty big kind of like incubation period before you're you know, allowed to prove yourself. So, I mean, if you're like a go-getter and you know, you have those fields of interest, then I definitely think that it's a place to look towards. In regards to like kind of like dipping the toes into the pool of like crypto and blockchain, by now, especially this year, because, you know, most of the events have been online. You know, there's tons of materials for you to kind of like start, you know, diving into. And then I also know, like, we had the same principle at the Maker Foundation, for example, that we don't hire, you know, people who necessarily have pre-existing experience in crypto. Of course, if you want to jump straight in and try to get a senior role, you would need to have some relevant work experience. But we actually hire a lot of people from like the more traditional space, and I think that I believe that the majority of the organization is made of people who, you know, have come in from like finance, tech, or, you know, some other kind of like, you know, close by industry. So even if you don't have any like work experience in the field, then you still have like pretty good chances of actually moving in and getting your first job. And a lot of the companies, they also knows that, you know, we kind of like only have the talent that is currently employed. So, you know, for this space to grow, you need to start attracting talent from the outside, and that's happening quite a bit now. But yeah, you know, if you have an interest in it, you know, it's a super exciting field. It's moving incredibly fast, especially in crypto, decentralized finance, the Ethereum space. You know, I have to spend several hours a week and just reading up on the news to stay somewhat updated with what's happening. So, you know, if you like fast pace, then I think it's super interesting and very exciting.
Thank you. And I'd perhaps now like to go to Tara, if you could talk a bit about your career, because you've worked in both tech and media, and in legal tech and in law. So it's been kind of an interesting career path. And I think it can be difficult for students starting now to know like what exactly they want to do in the future, especially when technology is really changing the kind of roles. So do you have any advice for people based on your experience?
Yeah, I mean, so I definitely have a non-traditional career path into law, and then have had a interesting kind of fork moving into more of the legal tech area. I get a lot of questions about whether people who are interested in the space should learn to code, you know, take up comp sci or engineering or things like that. Whilst I do think that my background in technology has been helpful to an extent, by no means would I say that anyone needs to have a strong technical, you know, education or experience to move into the sort of tech-focused area of law. But there are parallels in the sense that the training you get in terms of legal analysis that you'll get in law school, and in your early years of working, you know, either as a trainee or as a lawyer, where your job is a lot around mitigation of risk and identifying risk and then mitigating it away. What that means is you need to understand the universe of possibilities, what could happen, and how do you deal with that. And actually, from a programming perspective, that is something that programmers do need to do, because, you know, the code you write, for the most part, will only do what you tell it to do. And so there is an element in terms of the analysis and the way of thinking that works on both sides, but you definitely don't need to have a programming background if you want to move into law. And if you want to move from law into more of a tech-focused area, you certainly don't need to start teaching yourself things. I think certainly an aptitude for using technology, which is not really an issue for this new generation of people coming into the industry. I was kind of the last generation of people who grew up in a non-digital world and used encyclopedias and things like that. But frankly, an aptitude for understanding how things work, understanding how you would want to interact with things, just an innate sensibility about what good design is, what good user experience is, how people would want to do things and experience things is really important. And I think if you get some time practicing as a lawyer or working within a law firm, not necessarily as a lawyer, we have legal analysts who are law grads, for example, you get a sense of the client expectations, and therefore that makes you a little bit, not even a little bit, much more in tune to be able to anticipate some of the client needs and requirements, and can sort of help to feed that back in addition to directly liaising with clients and asking them, directly questions and demoing things with them. I think if you wanted to get into the space, there are two pathways, and for example, our firm actually has a pathway program that's directly into the Ashurst Advance division versus a training contract pathway, which is the traditional legal pathway. So there's actually two things you can do. The Ashurst Advance pathway, you would actually come in as a legal analyst, as I said, a law grad. You gain experience helping with the delivery of legal services. You work very closely with my team, in fact, because a lot of the times it's the legal analysts who are actually using some of the tools that we have. And you can see how the law firm works. You can get familiar with the practice. A lot of those legal analysts do go on to qualify as lawyers. I know there's usually a few years time frame sometimes between graduation and actually getting into a position. And then you can lateral around our team. So you can move from a legal analyst to a legal technology team. You can move into a legal project management team. And there's sort of new roles popping up in our area all the time. And I think there's other law firms who similarly are either allowing trainees to rotate into their innovation teams and to spend some time working there, or even people that are allowing secondments into the innovation teams. And I know there's some law firms that let the qualified lawyers second into their team as well. And law firms are becoming a lot more, I think, accepting and supportive of that concept of lawyers wanting to try something a bit different, wanting to move around the firm laterally a bit more, which traditionally has not happened as frequently, and also supporting innovative projects. So unfortunately, Ashurst doesn't have this yet, but there are a few law firms that offer, basically, short sabbaticals. If someone has an idea and they want to actually do something in the entrepreneurship area, they give them a sabbatical and they give them some time to go off and do that. Or sometimes they actually help to incubate that within their own firms. So there's a lot of different pathways, I think, now. There are, if you want to kind of go through it, either you do have to become a trainee, or you do have to find a team that will hire you straight into their NewLaw team. But what I think we're seeing a lot more now is within every firm, every law firm, the ability to start to move around a bit more, and an openness to that, which I think is really fantastic and important, especially for any law students who are going straight through and they haven't, taken a few years to work or anything like that. I had the benefit of working for 7 years before I decided to go into law, so I kind of got my head straight around what types of experiences I liked, what type of work I liked. And it's difficult when you're 21 and you have to make that decision and decide which area you want to practice of law, and that's quite a lot of pressure. I think I'm glad that I didn't do that. But and I think actually to what Udita said, that being open and learning, and if you're working in a particular area in a law firm, whether it's a new law or non-law role, that ability to say, actually, I want to keep learning. I'm going to, if I'm a lawyer, I'm going to learn more about technology. If I'm the legal analyst position, I want to learn more about technology, or actually I'm going to study up and try to qualify in, as a trainee. The willingness to put in that extra work, and that does mean, extra work, frankly, for people to learn those new skills on the side of your day job. But that definitely pays off. And there's a lot of movement within the industry now as well, in and out of law firms, into legal tech companies, into alternative legal service providers. There's a huge range now of different types of places you can work that aren't law firms, that frankly, in most cases are probably a little bit more fun, have a very different style of culture, will be much more like a tech tech community culture. So I think there's a lot of options. And I know I can say, for my team, we're actually in the market right now for some junior resource, and we're looking across, we want to see people from different industries, from different types of businesses. We don't just want someone from another law firm. And that's really great. There's a much bigger pool of talent, and there's a lot more opportunities for everyone that wants to get into this area.
Thank you. I think there's a lot of really useful takeaways there for all our listeners. And I think it's also a really great point about how the diversity of background can really help people bring something new to a field. And I know, Udita, you are very passionate about increasing diversity in STEM fields, and you're doing a lot of work in that. So why is that so important to you, and why do you think that STEM is currently so disproportionate?
Yeah, great questions. I think there are so many reasons as to why there is a general lack of diversity in STEM careers. And I do a lot of work right across the board, starting from school, high school. I'm engaged with local high schools in the community, as well as through to universities, and right through to grads and in grad schemes in my organization. And one of the problems seems to be a general mystery that surrounds STEM, and I think as people in the industry, we should all take some responsibility for demystifying these roles, because I think just like Gustav and Tara both said, people might have preconceived notions about the skills you need or the experience you need, and certain things, certain subjects you might need to know or not know. And I find there's a lot of that preconception that keeps people from applying. And so I think panels like these, and if people are listening in, I would know and listen to other people from other parts of the industry talk about this kind of stuff, because you will find that actually when you come on the inside, it's not that difficult to crack. And all you need is, a willingness to work hard, some basic skills you pick up at university, and that learning mindset, like I said. So I think demystifying the industry is an important part. Apart from that, there's obviously, the people who fall through the cracks because, a teacher didn't encourage them to take up science in school, or kids who think that, science is for boys, and it starts from a very early age, unfortunately, that kind of attaching gender to some of these roles. And again, there's a lot of good work going on in the industry around putting up people as role models, because it's important for younger people right through to university to see other people who are like them represented in these roles. And I think it's important for people to see gender diversity, but also religious diversity, also a diversity of color, of thought, of background, and to be able to believe that, if I really wanted to do that, I could. And so there's that. But yeah, I think I also speak, and I think some of us do speak from a position of privilege, because frankly, no one ever told me I couldn't do maths because I was a girl. So I don't know what that feels like. And I think in order to be inclusive, just generally, everyone needs to be aware of their own privilege and their own background, and to try and deconstruct how we think about these things. So I run a lot of internal training, and advocate people take more training on things like unconscious bias. I work with our large HR function to kind of remove bias from interviews, from CV reviews and things like that. And large organizations are really good at having big programs of work that are really looking at this stuff. And obviously, I'm passionate about it because I'm a non-visible, I'm a visible minority in the UK, and there are, people who are non-visible minorities in the UK as well. And it's the diversity of thought that makes tech not just more fun to work in, but also brings in a greater degree of flexibility in the services we create for our customers. Because frankly, not all of my customers look like me, right? But when I have a diverse team, then we become better together at delivering better products. And obviously that ends up making business sense, because at the end of the day, organizations are here to make profit. And if you make better products, then you get more customers, and that translates to money. So there's some very good hard evidence that you can go and read up on Harvard Business Review, and also the Google Chameleon project if you're interested in diversity topics. But I think in a nutshell, that's probably some of the STEM work that I do, and I'm quite passionate about. I don't know if it's just me, but I think you might be on mute, right. Amelia.
I can't hear you, Amelia.
Still can't hear you.
No. That's strange.
We may have lost your audio.
Hi, is this working again?
That's back, yeah.
Apologies for that. I was just going to say, I think this is a really nice point to wrap up on. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you all, and there's so many more questions I would love to ask you. But I hope that this has been a great introduction for everyone watching to some of the vastly different careers you can go into in finance, technology, legal tech. Thank you so much for coming along today. It's been great to talk to you.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. Bye.